Hey y'all, Blaumagier here, and I have been presented with a challenge, if you will, in the form of another tier list from my friend Brickroad, where he included all the Robot Masters from Mega Man's 1 through 11, plus the Robot Masters from Mega Man and Base, Mega Man 5 for Game Boy, and Mega Man Rock and Roll, the fan game. And I'm going to go ahead and rate them all. My criteria for rating them is going to be not based on the Buster only fight. So just that I think is its own rating. I'll be judging each of these fights based on fighting them with their weakness, their primary weakness. I will be judging them based on things like how efficient the energy consumption is against the Robot Master, how much damage the weapon deals to them, how hard or easy it is to avoid the Robot Master's pattern of movement and attacks, and just a general overall how much fun is it to fight this Robot Master. I do have to decide on a uniform way to rate them, and since this tier list includes Oil Man and Time Man, the only fair way to rate the rest of the Robot Masters from Mega Man 1 is to rate them all based on their fight in Powered Up, the new style, which is the only place that Oil Man and Time Man appear. However, they do all have several appearances, and I'll go ahead and talk about them. Bomb Man, for example, in the NES fight, he just jumps around the room. Sometimes he doesn't throw a bomb when he lands, but usually he does, and he'll throw it to your location. In the NES version, he has an AI glitch where if Mega Man is close to him, he just won't throw a bomb when he lands. And every other version of the fight, they seem to have fixed that. He does not want to be next to Mega Man, so he will jump away from Mega Man. And I believe he does that in every version of the fight with Bomb Man. In the Genesis, in Powered Up Old Style, even Powered Up New Style, I believe if you just get close to Bomb Man, he'll jump away from you. He's not in the Game Boy version. Bomb Man and Guts Man were the two Mega Man 1 Robot Masters that never showed up in the Game Boy games. And obviously Time Man and Oil Man, since they haven't been created at that point in time. So, with all that out of the way, let's talk about New Style. I'm not really going to differentiate the difficulty modes, because normal and easy are the exact same, except on easy, I think every weapon affects him as if it was a weakness. I don't think it changes the damage it deals, but they all stun him and reset his pattern. And in easy mode, he won't shoot the big bombs, his hyper attack, as I'm going to call it for the rest of this. So, on normal mode, it's basically the same as hard mode, except he only throws one bomb when he lands. And I think the Hyper Bomb always just thuds right in the place wherever he throws it. So on hard mode, the Hyper Bomb will bounce a couple times, or it could just land right where he throws it. It's not too difficult to avoid because it'll either land harmlessly right in front of him and you could be on the other side of the room, or it'll bounce 3 times. I think it's always 3 times, and you can walk under the bounces. The thing that's difficult to avoid about the fight is that he throws 2 bombs when he lands. But you can still exploit his AI that he just does not want to be near Mega Man. One of the key differences in the new style and Powered Up for Bomb Man is that he's weak to the Rolling Cutter. He is weak to the Firestorm in his other appearances. They did change the weaknesses around a little bit to accommodate adding 2 new Robot Masters. and that's just where he landed. I don't think it really changes the fight a whole lot, because one of the things about it is with the Firestorm, you would kind of rely on that little shield that swirls around Mega Man every time you fire to hit Bomb Man more often than you would the actual shot from the Firestorm. And the Rolling Cutter kinda does the same purpose there with the way it arcs around. The fight, it's pretty satisfying. For these tiers, I'll say S rank would be like, this is a great fight. It goes above and beyond other fights. A tier, I think I would say it's a good fight, it just falls slightly short of that wow factor to put it in the S tier. B tier is going to be like an above average kind of baseline down the middle fight. C will be like a below average baseline down the middle fight. D will be a fight that has some issues, and F, these are just bad fights. Bob Man, I think I'm comfortable putting him in the B tier. It's a good fight. It's competent. It's not the easiest to avoid some of the patterns with the two bombs being thrown out. And I mean, that's not an issue in the NES version or Genesis or any of the others, but like I said, I gotta rate it by the new style powered up fight to be fair. Next up we have Cutman. Now Cutman has the distinct honor of being the robot master in the most amount of games. And it would be a list that's even longer if I were including the power fighters and power battles. But I'm not gonna include those since those are more akin to like arcade style fighters than they are typical Mega Man games. But I mean, he's been in Mega Man 8, where he had like a little bit of dialogue where he's all about wanting revenge on Mega Man. Not to mention, he had a really sick remix of his stage theme from Mega Man 1. And the fight itself is actually pretty cool. I do enjoy that rendition of the fight. Although they did do Cutman kind of dirty in that, and in the fact that there's not a single weapon that does less than 2 damage to him. Multiples do 4 damage to him. He's weak to a lot of weapons in that game. He was also in Mega Man X8 of all games, where you accessed him by having a Mega Man X command mission save data on your memory card on the PS2 version, or on any of the Legacy Collection ports, as well as the PS2 version. You could use a code at the title screen that would force him to appear once you reached the end of Optic Sunflower stage. And that fight was in like a 2.5D rendition of his Mega Man 1 NES stage. And the fight was a little different, but it was also like kind of the same. I don't know. It doesn't translate well to Mega Man X. That's probably why they made him ridiculously easy. He's actually weak to the weapon and technique that you get from Gigabolt Man-O-War. I do like how they do kind of like the Paper Mario effect when he turns around and it's all 2D and stuff. That's pretty cool. So, the Game Boy version of the fight is kind of like a watered down version of the NES version of the fight. He's got a different weakness than normal, because his normal weakness is the super arm, but Gutsman's not in the Game Boy game. So instead he's weak to the Firestorm. And that's fine, that kind of works because he does jump around and likes to get close to Mega Man a lot. The problem is, trying to copy the NES version didn't work so well because he doesn't jump as high and it's pretty difficult to actually avoid being jumped on. but it doesn't really matter because the weaknesses do so much damage in the Game Boy games. The fight's over in like 5 hits. Now the NES version and also the Genesis version both have a fatal flaw in their fights, because Cutman is weak to the super arm. And this is more a complaint with the super arm than it is with the fight, but you know what? It's his weakness, so I gotta address it. There are 2 guts blocks in the boss arena. And in both the Genesis and NES version, and even the old style version in Powered Up, that is enough to kill him. Each block takes off half of his health if it hits him. However, if you miss, your energy doesn't matter. You're going to have plenty of energy, but if you miss, that block is gone. Like, even if you die and come back, that block is not respawning. They did fix this in Powered Up Old Style. If you die and respawn, the blocks come back. But in the NES and Genesis version, they're gone forever. But thankfully, his secondary weakness, and this will be the only Robot Master that I really talk about this with, is the Mega Buster itself. To the point that it feels intentional, like they knew that maybe it was some kind of limitation in the NES version that they couldn't get the Guts blocks to respawn. But there's no Guts blocks at all in his arena in the rematches, so it had to have been intentional that it takes a lot of damage from the Mega Buster. It takes 5 damage from each shot. For whatever reason, in the Genesis version, they were like, nope, he's going to take 1 damage from the Mega Buster. This was a bizarre decision, because he still doesn't have any Guts blocks in his arena in that version. But his basic pattern is that he will throw his rolling cutter, which acts like a boomerang. It'll go all the way across until it hits the floor or a wall, depending on where he throws it. I think he can only throw it when he's on the ground in the NES version and the Genesis version. But the basic loop of the fight is he throws his rolling cutter, you jump over it, you run towards him. He jumps up pretty high, so you just want to go under him. When you get close to him, he'll jump over Mega Man. And if you're still near him when he lands, he'll jump again. But the basic idea is you want to just weave in between his rolling cutter, go underneath him, and get far enough away that he won't jump again, and then just pummel him with shots until he throws his rolling cutter again. And that's a pretty satisfying gameplay loop. But things get a little bit different in the new style in the Powered Up fight. They add his hyper attack, where he creates a giant scissor blade that mows across the floor, goes up the wall, and then does kind of an arc to where you are once it reaches the top. So generally what you want to do is have a little bit of space between him and the wall, jump over it as it goes across, and then run towards the wall. It's satisfying to avoid. The problem is his normal AI in this fight. He tries to jump on Mega Man. Like, whatever your location is, when he starts to jump, that's where he's trying to jump to. And that really throws the rest of the fight into chaos. Because there is no real loop, and you kind of have to get lucky to avoid getting hit between his rolling cutter and trying to jump on you. There's also times where he doesn't try to jump when you're right next to him, and you'll just plow right into him trying to avoid him. And then, of course, one issue that I definitely have to address, and this is something they could have fixed, because there is another fight in Mega Man 1 that is weak to the super arm, and it had the same flaw that there are only so many Guts blocks and they don't respawn. They changed that fight in new style Powered Up so that the boss spawns in Guts blocks. They could have done this for Cutman, like maybe every time he does his hyper attack, maybe a Guts block would fall from the sky. But for whatever reason, they decided to make Cutman take significantly less damage from the Guts blocks, But there's still only 2 Guts blocks in the stage, and they do not respawn at any point during the fight. For that, I've got to give Cutman the D tier. It's a fight that I think this fight was much better on the NES. Even the buggy Genesis version was better, and they pretty much achieved perfection with it on the old style. All of those would have been rated much higher. I might have even put old style in A tier. But they've got some good things about the new style fight, but they kind of ruined it on a basic level. And that's why I gotta put it down there in the D tier. Next up is Electman, and I don't even really have to think about it. This guy's an F tier. So, in the NES game, and the Genesis game, and even retained in the old style version to Powered Up, Mega Man is weak to the Thunderbolt. This weapon kills him in 3 hits from full health, and that is absurd. Mega Man should not have a weakness. I know the reason they did this is because of the copy robot. They needed it to have a weakness. But, you know, new style was able to give it a weakness without giving Mega Man a weakness, and that's how it should have done, at least in the remakes. But, whatever, I get that the old style was trying to be pretty faithful. The fight itself is not very good. Electman just tries to throw a Thunder Beam, charge towards you, jump back, throw a Thunder Beam in the air, just lather, rinse, repeat. There's 2 Guts blocks in the arena, which I guess help facilitate being able to jump over his shots when they're on the top. I don't know. I find the best way to fight him is to just run into him to take like 2 pips of damage instead of a third of your health, and then abuse your iframes to hit him with the rolling cutter. It only takes like 3 hits to kill him as well with the rolling cutter, and that's even his weakness in the Game Boy game, where he dies super fast because his iframes are so short, and you're actually not weak to the Thunder Beam there for some reason. Interestingly to note, though, is that the Guts blocks in the old style version of the Powered Up arena are on the sides, like 1 on each side, instead of both of them on the left side, like the NES and the Genesis version. I don't know why they did that. Maybe they just forgot that's how it was. Did it the way they did in the Powered Up room. But let's talk about the Powered Up version of the fight. I actually think the fight itself is alright. He kind of goes left and right, shooting the Thunder Beam. I think he doesn't want to actually make contact with Mega Man still, so he'll turn around before running directly into Mega Man. But the problem is, his weakness is the Oil Slider, which is a cool weapon. I love the Oil Slider. You make a little blob of oil on the ground, and if you step on it, you get this Oil Slider, like, surfboard thing. You can go really fast with it. You can do a double jump off of it. It's an awesome weapon. Problem is, it's very limited. The little blob you shoot out, Electman can step on it, or you can hit him directly with it, and it does, I think, 2 pips of damage, which is still more than it would do to anything else, doing just a single pip to anything. But the problem is, it's really difficult to hit him with the actual board, which is the true weakness. It does like 6 or 7 pips of damage to him. It's pretty massive difference. I feel like it would have been better if they had just made it so you could shoot more than 1 blob at a time. Like maybe the first one puts a blob on the ground, and then you can shoot 1 more blob on the screen at a time that doesn't put a puddle on the ground. And maybe they could have made the blob do 1 more damage for a total of 3. But they didn't. And then with the Guts blocks on the sides, that just makes it even harder to actually get on the Oil Slider. His hyper attack is a Thunderbolt that comes from the ceiling, and if you're standing above the Guts blocks when it goes down, it will destroy the Guts blocks, making it easier to maneuver in the arena. And the Thunderbolt is easy enough to avoid. I think he only shoots out 1 on normal, but he shoots 3 on hard. But it's just it's a cramped arena, and it's so hard to actually hit him with his true weakness that I have to put it in the F tier. It's not a good fight. Next up is Fireman. Now, Fireman, I'm actually going to put him in the A tier. Yeah. He's a weird one. So, let's talk about the Game Boy version first. In all versions, he's weak to the Ice Slasher. He takes a massive amount of damage from it. The energy efficiency on it. I mean, I really don't need to talk about energy efficiency for the Mega Man 1 bosses at all, because they're all really good, barring a few exceptions. Mostly in the powered-up new style. But anyway, Ice Slasher kills him in like 3 or 4 hits. It's really good. So on the Game Boy version, it's like the most basic version of this fight. He tries to stay a set amount of distance away from Mega Man, and he just shoots his little fire waves at you at a set interval. And then you got the Genesis version of the fight, where it seems like they were... Keep in mind, the NES version came first. It seems like the Genesis version was like a midway between the Game Boy and the NES, where, like, he's adapted some of the techniques from the NES version, like shooting multiple fire waves at a time, shooting them at slightly more random intervals, and also having a little flame ignite on the floor underneath his fire waves when he shoots them. But he still retains that whole trying to stay a set amount of distance away from Mega Man thing, which honestly makes the Genesis version the most satisfying of the non-new style fights for Fireman. Then we got the NES version. He's just totally on crack. Like, his fire waves move so fast, he can shoot 2 or 3 at a time. There's no rhyme or reason to when he shoots them. He will definitely shoot one when you shoot at him. He does try to just walk back and forth across the room. If you don't shoot at him, you'll see this pattern. He'll still randomly fire off fire waves whenever he's facing you. But it's extremely hard to not get hit by this fight, and it's not a very good fight. I would rank the NES version significantly lower. And the old style version is basically the exact same, except the fire waves move slightly slower. It's weird. So then that brings us to new style. Why am I putting him in A? It's actually a really satisfying fight. Yes, he can still shoot fire waves kind of randomly, but they do cap him at 2 at a time. And I think only the second wave will leave a fire on the floor. So whichever one's the last one he shoots. He can also jump and shoot one in the air. I don't think my footage actually showed that. But then he's got his hyper attack, which is he sends his firestorm along the ground, and it creates a nice wave as it goes back and forth across the room. I think on normal it goes away once it hits a wall, but on hard it'll hit a wall and then go back the other way. And it's fun to dodge over that because, like, you're really in control of this fight as far as when he shoots at you. If he is turned away from you, he will not shoot you. He's still going to try and walk back and forth across the room. He will not shoot you if he is faced away unless you shoot at him. So you dodge his hyper attack by timing your shots well, and it's a cool fight because of that. Also, you can freeze his firestorm with the Ice Slasher, so that's cool. Next up, we have Gutsman. Gutsman was not in the Game Boy game, like I said. And his fight in the NES version and the Genesis version, and even in the old style version of Powered Up, is very similar. He has a tendency to encroach on the left side of the room. Sometimes his movement is very random, and there's no way to know what he's going to do except that if he just jumps straight up instead of to the left or to the right, he will follow that up with a guts block that he's going to throw at you. Whenever he lands on the ground, if you are standing on the ground or land back down on the ground before the screen stops shaking. Mega Man falls on his butt and is stunned for a moment. It doesn't do damage, but does leave you wide open for a Guts block if he follows it up with it. His weakness is the Hyper Bomb, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to hit him with because it bounces on the floor, it's got a weird arc to it, it's got a delay on the explosion, it doesn't blow up when it touches him. And then, for some reason, in the old style version of the fight, well, I know why they did it, because they only have one engine for physics. It's the same reason why Mega Man's shots bounce off of walls in the old style when they didn't in the NES version. But in the old style version of the fight with Gutsman, when he pulls a block up out of the ground, because they don't fall from the ceiling like they do in the NES and Genesis, he pulls them out of the ground. If there's a bomb like on him, it will knock the bomb out of the way and the explosion will not hit him. So I do actually think that the old style version of this fight is the most satisfying because it adds a layer of challenge. The blocks fly a little slower, they're a little easier to get out of the way of, and just his movement in general is a little bit slower, so it's easier to time your hyper bombs. The new style version of the fight, I mean, it's kind of the same, basically. The only difference is there's no Guts blocks to stand on, really, in the arena. Strange that they took the Guts blocks out of Gutsman's arena. But anyway, the thing about this fight is he's got his hyper attack, where on normal mode he'll do this once, and hard mode he does 3 times. He will dig down into the ground and then pop up with a Guts block that immediately explodes, or he immediately throws and it explodes against the wall. It's very difficult to dodge this attack. You have to anticipate it and be jumping and moving out of the way, or else you're going to get hit by it. That's just all there is to it. And he does it 3 times in a row before returning to normal attack cycle. And like all the hyper attacks, it seems to be kind of just randomly decided when he does a hyper attack. So I'm not a big fan of how much time gets wasted in the fight. And speaking of time, his weakness is the time slow, which you get 2 uses of, which is nowhere near enough to defeat him. I said you generally don't have to worry about energy efficiency, except in new style, and this is one of them. And I think because of all this, I had to put Gutsman in the D tier. The fight has got some issues. That's just really all I could say about it. You'd think he would have done better being Dr. Wily's favorite robot. That brings us up to Iceman next. So, Iceman in all of his older appearances is basically the same fight with the minorest of with the most minor of differences. So his basic pattern as established in the NES version is he'll generally skate a small distance to the right or the left of where he starts from, and then he'll shoot 3 times while jumping, basically shooting Ice Slasher at 3 different levels, and then he'll do it in the opposite direction. And then he'll just skate along, find another place, and keep doing this. His weakness is the Thunder Beam, so he goes down pretty quick. I think 3 hits in all versions, I believe. The Genesis version of this fight is the exact same, except when he gets enough Ice Slashers out, there's some slowdown on the screen, which can either make it easier or harder to dodge. And then the Game Boy version is basically the same fight, except instead of shooting at 3 different levels, he only shoots at 2 different levels, but he alternates more. And the old style version of this fight is basically the same, except he can like come all the way over to the left instead of going to the right, which he usually doesn't do in the other versions. The new style in Power Up, however, is a bit of a different beast. First off, he's weak to the Hyper Bomb instead of the Thunder Beam. he tends to just like rapid fire the Ice Slasher. He can shoot like 4 or 5 on the ground in a row. And I really don't think he ever really stops firing it until he does his hyper attack, which summons 3 or 4 icicles from the ceiling that fall down. They create walls that block your shots. They can be stood on, though. Thankfully, the hyper bomb does explode when it makes contact with him, so you don't have to be super precise and time it very well. But if you do throw it at him while he's summoning the icicles from the ceiling, it will bounce off of him and then be out of range, even if he becomes vulnerable again before it explodes. It's not too bad. It's not the best fight I've ever done, but you know, I think we can put him solidly in the C tier. Next up is Oil Man. He's only had one appearance, and that is in Mega Man Powered Up in the new style. He's not in the old style because he wasn't in the original games. His fight pattern is he tries to either walk or jump, or a combination of walking and jumping from one side of the arena to the other. Once he reaches the side, he will jump and shoot 3 blobs of oil that are tracking Mega Man. They don't home in, but he will shoot wherever you're standing at the time that he shoots. And those can be fun to time your jumps and dodges and whatnot. Then he will sometimes use his hyper attack, which is the oil slider. He gives a very obvious tell by saying something like, "It's showtime," and does a little dance, and then he just slides across the screen really fast. It's pretty easy to dodge, but he's invincible while he's doing it, and he can do it up to 4 times on hard mode that I've seen. Possibly even more. And like with all the other hyper attacks, there's just no rhyme or reason to when he decides to do it. So he could do it. He could do it 4 times, be vulnerable for a few seconds, and then just decide to do it 4 more times. It's kind of weird. If you do step on one of the oil blobs once they're left behind on the ground, you will slip and fall on your butt and be vulnerable. So that's an alright fight. A little bit too much invincibility time for Oil Man. I think I would put it in the B tier. Definitely below Bomb Man. And that leaves us with our final Robot Master for Mega Man 1, Time Man. This Robot Master has the distinction of being the only Robot Master whose arena that you enter from the left side of the screen. Similar to how I think Elect Man is the only one that you enter from the bottom, and Bomb Man I think is the only one you enter from the top. And that's of the whole series, not just of Mega Man 1. Anyway, he's got another interesting thing about him. He's got a very set in stone pattern. As far as I can tell, it's not just a speedrunner trick, but like he always does the exact same thing unless you change which side of the room you're standing on. And his pattern is he'll just run left and right across the screen. He'll shoot an arrow, he'll jump and shoot an arrow, and then I think he'll land and shoot another arrow, and then he'll slow time, and time will be slow while he's doing this next bit where he, while still running left and right across the screen, he'll, you know, shoot the arrow, jump, shoot the arrow, land, shoot another arrow, and then he'll return time to normal, and that's just his pattern. And it's satisfying to learn how to avoid this pattern. It's just a good fight. That's all I can say about it. I would put it in the A tier. Probably above Fireman, actually.